Welcome back, everybody, to 4th Age Guides, and today we are looking at the Kingdom of Dale. In particular, its battlefield options. I have a custom battle here set up, which shows sort of your basic core roster for the kingdom. And we will take a look at this first. We do have an approaching army of Rune here in this battle, since you very likely will be fighting them towards the mid-game, probably. But in any case, I have got a front line that is pretty ranged heavy, starting with your highest tier longbowmen, the black arrows. One notable thing about these guys is you can tell they have pretty significant armor, and they also have the ability to sort of encourage nearby men. They have a morale boosting sort of area of effect. So that's a kind of a nice thing. I wouldn't, if I had to do this over again, probably wouldn't put them on the flanks like this. Maybe keep them back here behind the lines. But the other thing about them is they can stand on their own as something of a melee unit as well. They have axes that they use in melee, so they're quite effective in that role. I brought all the other types of archers as well that you can get as Dale, at least in your homelands. Sort of the middle tier are these longbowmen of Dale. They come in a unit size of 50 on large unit sizes. And then the lowest tier is your barding longbowmen, which come in unit sizes of 60. So these are fairly similar units. You can see there are some differences. The longbowmen of Dale, although fewer in number, have better armor, a bit more durability, a bit higher missile attack than these guys. Although these guys are cheaper to recruit, a bit faster to recruit. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. I also brought some ballistas of Dale, which you can get eventually through a specialization building. We talked about all those options in the campaign guide video. You don't get anything higher than this. Honestly, I don't bring these in battles most of the time. I'll train one and usually bring it around kind of as a prestige thing. But in a fight like this, they're not super effective. I would have been better to have another unit of archers probably, or another melee unit. Over here, I debated whether including these guys or not, but I went with it. Dale crossbowmen, just to show you that they exist. They are something of a hidden Easter egg unit, so maybe I'm giving away a bit too much by showing them here. But in the campaign video, I talked about how you can recruit them. You will never see these in the campaign unless you go through the trouble of getting them yourself. They're a good unit, but there is a problem of them getting caught here. And this battle, I've got to say, is not my best work. It's a little embarrassing, but maybe in some respect, that's just as well. Because the chiefdom or the Kingdom of Dale, in a lot of ways, what you see is what you get with them. And even here, when I'm way off my game and just not paying attention and not reacting very quickly at all, you can do pretty well as them. They're fairly intuitive in terms of how their units operate. So I have a couple of cavalry options here. The first one is this Riders of Dale. Your heavily armed cavalry, I guess, apart from your bodyguard. There's something of a medium cav, I guess I would say. But they're not going to be enough to break this unit of Axemen of Rune by themselves, although they do quite a number. So before the spearmen come in, I want to get those out of the way. I also have lower tier cav. These are sword-armed, your Dale Mounted Watch. They are lighter, but there's enough of them, and they're sturdy enough that they're going to do quite well, even though their armor is not the best. In terms of infantry, we have some solid options. Right here with the two-handed axes and really good armor, you can see the Hearthmen of Dale. You want a couple of units of these in your armies, I would say. You can get them fairly early. You do have to do a bit of building before you can train them on a campaign, but it is definitely worth it. They are your answer to heavily armored units, but you want to keep them away from missiles and cav charges for the most part. Much lower tier infantry is these Dale Watch. These are second tier, and they're swordsmen essentially, so pretty basic. And making up the front line, or the main part of my infantry line, was Black Spears. And we'll look at all these units in the pre-battle screen to get a better sense for them. But Black Spears are really your core of your army in a lot of ways as Dale. You're going to build your army around these guys. In the early game, you may not have a ton, but you're going to have the economy to support a lot of them in your armies eventually. So I think I brought 4 to this battle. I probably should have gone with something like 6. Then I would have had less to worry about in terms of micromanaging my archers. As you can see over here, my archers got chased all the way to the side of the map, but they were able to rout all these guys. Here the black arrows are in melee mode, routing Axemen of Rune. and so they do fairly well on their own. The bodyguard unit for Dale, Dragon Slayers here, just a really, really good cavalry bodyguard unit, heavily armed, spears as well as swords for melee work, and so they're really not going to let you down. So again, you know, I did not do a great job of tracking the enemy's charges and keeping my my archers out of harm's way, but we still did fairly well. We're at this point just going to be cleaning up the last few knots of resistance. The enemy general is still remaining on the field, but even with me kind of sleepwalking through this battle, the Hearthmen of Dale did very well indeed. There he goes. And then we're just going to chase down the few ranged units that remain. So the archers kind of stand on their own, and your Hearthmen will really see you through. The black spears have that the precursor weapon, sort of a thrown spear, and they've got solid enough armor and melee skill to stand in a battle, even if again you're not paying too much attention. So here, just look at the Hearthmen. 0 casualties sustained for one unit, but they only got 13 kills. 14 losses for the other, and they killed 141, which is more than anyone but the crossbowmen. The crossbowmen of Dale did very well, although again I was not as careful with them as I should have been, so they took more losses than I would like for that unit size. So the crossbowmen are a great weapon, but again, you've got to go through the building tree to find out where to train those guys. So lesson from this, you can do well as Dale. If you are not super confident in your battle tactics, Dale is a great choice for the most part. Not to say that you're going to win every single fight, but you're going to have a better chance with them than many others. You don't have to do a lot of micromanaging. Because even when you fail to do so, as you saw there with your archers, they can usually come back from a fight. Okay, so let's take a look at this fairly large roster for the Kingdom of Dale. The core units are, of course, here, but there's a lot of others that I did not include on the custom battle that we saw. Most of them are regional types. So woodman axes, for example. We've got woodman spears, woodman bows, and woodman riders. These are, of course, all units that are available to the Bjornings, and they're pretty solid. You know, these are much lighter than your core troops, but they are much cheaper as well. They tend to come in larger unit sizes also, so the woodman riders are more numerous than either your Mounted Watch or your Riders of Dale. The woodman spears are actually the same size as your lower tier. Actually, they're a little smaller, actually, in terms of size than your Barding Militia. But they're a bit better in terms of attack, and slightly worse in terms of defense. Actually, no, better in terms of defense as well. So a lot of times, these guys are actually pretty cost-effective options, especially the woodman bows. Missile attack of 6 is going to be lower than your missile attack of 7 for your Barding Longbowmen, which is your lowest tier of longbows. But these guys are quite a bit cheaper, and they come in a similar unit size. So for the most part, in your regional areas, like in the northern Anduin Vales, where you start with Framsburg, you will find these woodman units, and you will also find them if you conquer down into that region to Old Ford and so forth. So it's worth training them. That's what you get in the area anyway. In other parts of the world, Rovanian, which is just south of your starting position, you will find Rovanian axemen, Rovanian spearmen. Let's see, what else do we get here? Rovanian hunters and Rovanian foresters, as well as Rovanian scouts, an excellent light cav unit. So this Rovanian scouts is actually, in some ways, the answer to the one thing that you're not super strong on as Dale, which is light, hard-hitting cavalry. So they've got a charge of 16, as opposed to the charge of 10 for your native cav. Actually, the charge of 15 for the Woodman Riders is pretty decent as well. But these guys are really kind of built for that charge. Eventually, you will get Riders of Dale, but they are fewer and more expensive, and they take longer to train. So Rovanian Scouts are definitely worth getting, as are, again, all of these units, Rovanian Axemen and Rovanian Spearmen, as well as the Hunters. The Skirmishers, the Rovanian Foresters, are also noteworthy because you don't really get any Javelin throwers as Dale. You can fling archers in any number of ways, but you don't get any sort of dedicated skirmisher types. So this is pretty nice to have, actually, depending on your play style. They do take a bit of micro, though. Some of the more elite stuff, though, in your other territories would include Dorwinian halberdiers. And let's talk about those guys for a second. So they're in some ways similar to your native Hearthmen of Dale, in that they lack a shield, but they are very heavily armed, and they can sort of handle things on their own for the most part, and they are also effective against armor because they have that two-handed halberd. However, they are a bit better against cavalry than the Hearthmen, and so they're going to be very effective against some of the potentially late-game units if you end up fighting the Reunited Kingdom or the Kingdom of Adunabar or the higher-tier cavalry of Rune. The Dorwinian halberdiers, a couple of those in an army can make excellent work of any of those cav-type enemies. So these are available, of course, in Dorwinian eventually. Any other Dorwinian troops? I'm not seeing any at this point. A Dwarven unit. So if this is not Dwarven, but this is available in Dwarven lands. If you are to take a Dwarven settlement, you can train mountain wardens out of there. So the idea is you're sort of picking up fighting styles from the dwarves or something like that, or just sort of mimicking their style, I guess. What these guys are armed with is a warhammer in one hand and a shield in the other, very heavily armored. A very interesting looking unit as well, very distinct from your usual roster. But in my experience, it's unlikely that you're going to get these, at least the way that I play. So the easiest way to get them is to betray your allies, the dwarves, because you have a dwarven territory right next to your capital, of course, the Lonely Mountain, Erebor, right? A little further downriver and right adjacent to the Sea of Rune, you also have, I believe it's Nareg Zigil, another dwarven settlement. And further to the, further north into the mountains, you have other settlements of the dwarves that you could get potentially even before them. Some of them begin under the control of orcs. So if you don't want to betray the dwarves, I guess that would be the way to do it, to send scouts around, find a settlement that is dwarven and held by orcs, and take it for yourself, and eventually you get mountain wardens. But they take a very long time to get to. So if you are in it for the long haul, that might be an option for you. Again, effective against armor, good morale, great armor. So this is, in some ways, going to give you even more of an option. And they sort of give something to your roster that the halberdiers and the Hearthmen don't, in that they have that shield. So they're going to be more resilient in the front line and just able to chew through heavy infantry from other nations. So again, this might be something for if you find yourself facing very strong late game Reunited Kingdom or Adunabar, which tends to go low on missile training, and they tend to bring a lot of very tough infantry to the fight. Another type of elite that's really more of a native troop, though, is the Framsburg Guard. The little ring here on the custom battle unit card indicates that they are a bodyguard unit, and I believe you do start with one already in Framsburg in the campaign. You can eventually train up to them, but for the most part, these are a sword and shield infantry unit, so they're probably the weakest of these elite types, because they don't have the excellent armor of some of these units, and they don't have the offensive power either. They do have the ability to make a shield wall, so that gives them a bit of advantage, I suppose, in terms of managing fatigue and just being unstoppable. But I never felt it necessary to bring a lot of these in any of my battles, if that makes sense. Some other units we haven't really talked about that didn't make an appearance in the battle are the Barding Militia. So this is your Tier 1 infantry unit, and just spear and shield, extremely basic. Fairly decent, though. They're going to help you against that low-tier cavalry that you might be facing in Rune or Rovanian or North Rune. But again, they're going to be likely garrison candidates, so that's probably how I would use them, at least initially. If you go into lands held by, say, the Reunited Kingdom, If you end up at war with them, or if you end up conquering portions of Gondor for some reason, maybe you're playing a very long campaign, then you can train retainer swordsmen. And so these are very similar to the men-at-arms that are trained by the Dunedain. And so it might be worth it to get these guys. They can do shield wall as well. Good armor, good defense. They have a sword as well as the shield and the armor. So again, they're going to be a pretty decent unit for you. One thing that I do find in the late game is that I do tend to struggle, because early game you're just fine to use these black spears as the core of your army. But as the game drags on, and if you find yourself against a very powerful Dunedainic faction, their infantry can actually be quite effective against this. And so you do have to think about other options. So maybe something that's more akin to their native style would be appropriate to bring to bear against them. All right, I think that covers just about everything. Oh, there's one others. So this is the retainer scouts, and so this is something that you could get in Rohan, a horse archer unit. This is the only one that you can train apart from local levies, which you might find in Khand. But of course, if you're going into that part of the world, it's going to be difficult for you potentially to hold those territories, because they're going to be very far from your capital. It can be done, but retainer scouts are going to be more heavily armed and just a bit better, a bit more robust than the outrider levies that you might be training in Khand, which are very fast but very, very light. So all in all, you get a bit of everything as Dale. Just from your own native roster, you've got more than enough to deal with the initial challenges that you face. And even if you are not paying as much attention as you should be, like I was in that last battle, you're going to more often than not come out on top as the Kingdom of Dale, which again reemphasizes what I mentioned in the campaign guide, that these guys make an excellent first choice. If you are just getting into the mod, want to get your toes wet, can't go wrong starting up a campaign as the Kingdom of Dale. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you'll join me in the next one. We are going to continue the 4th Age guides. Maybe we're going to take a trip down to Far Harad next and take a look at that particular faction. I'm not totally sure. But again, thanks for viewing, and I will check you out in the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.